Welcome everyone, join us today as we explore the journey of Richard Wright, the keyboardist whose innovative sounds helped define Pink Floyd's legendary music. From the band's early days to iconic albums like Dark Side of the Moon, a musical genius whose work continues to inspire generations. So let's dive in. Richard William Wright, born the 28th of July 1943 in Hatch End, Middlesex, in England. His parents, Cedric and Bridie Wright, had two other children, Selina and Guinevere. Wright, whose father was the head biochemist at Unigate, grew up in Hatch End, Middlesex. He attended Haberdashers' Ask School and, at age 12, taught himself guitar, trombone, trumpet, and piano while recovering from a broken leg. Encouraged by his mother, he focused on piano and later took private lessons in music theory and composition at the Eric Gilder School of Music. Influenced by the trad jazz revival, Wright also learned the saxophone but continued to prioritize the piano. In 1962, unsure of his future path, he enrolled in Regent Street Polytechnic, now part of the University of Westminster, to study architecture. While studying at Regent Street Polytechnic, Wright met Roger Waters and Nick Mason. Together, they joined Sigma 6, a band formed by their classmate Clive Metcalfe. Wright's role in the band was initially uncertain, as he alternated between piano, rhythm guitar, and trombone based on availability. Wright, Waters, and Mason moved into a house in Stanhope Gardens, Highgate, where they began to rehearse seriously, aiming to become a professional group. Unlike his bandmates, Wright found architecture uninteresting and after a year switched to the London College of Music. He then took a break to travel to Greece. During his absence, their landlord, Mike Leonard, temporarily replaced Wright and bought a Farfisa electric organ, which later became Wright's primary instrument. Through a friend, Wright arranged Pink Floyd's first recording session at a West Hampstead studio just before Christmas in 1964. Guitarist Bob Closer and guitarist-singer Syd Barrett joined the band, which soon became known as Pink Floyd. Wright's first solo song, You're the Reason Why, was released in 1964 as the B-side of a single by Adam, Mike, and Tim. By mid-1965, Pink Floyd stabilized with Barrett, Waters, Mason, and Wright, becoming regulars on London's underground circuit. While Barrett dominated as the primary songwriter and singer, Wright played a crucial supporting role. He handled keyboards, sang harmonies, contributed arrangements, and occasionally wrote and sang lead. As the most technically skilled musician in the group, Wright also tuned Barrett's guitars and Waters' bass during concerts, using a Strobotuner for silent tuning. Before Pink Floyd had a full-time road crew, Wright served as the primary roadie, handling the setup and teardown of their gear at each performance. Pink Floyd released their debut album, The Piper at the Gates of Dawn, in 1967. Although not credited, Wright sang lead on Barrett-written songs like Astronomy Domini and Matilda Mother. Some of his early compositions included Remember a Day, Seesaw, Paintbox, and It Would Be So Nice. Wright was close friends with Barrett, and they even shared a flat in Richmond, London. After Barrett's departure from Pink Floyd in 1968 due to mental health issues, Wright considered forming a band with him but realized it wasn't practical. Wright played on Barrett's second solo album, Barrett, in 1970, and assisted with its production, seeing it as a way to support Barrett. He also guested at a Sutherland Brothers and Quiver concert in 1974 at Newcastle Polytechnic. In the 1970s, Wright was influenced by contemporary progressive rock bands, especially enjoying early Genesis with Peter Gabriel. He would later invite some of Gabriel's solo touring musicians to play on his solo album Broken China. Wright had a unique style of organ playing in Pink Floyd, often using Egyptian scales in his solos, as heard on Matilda Mother, and set the controls for the Heart of the Sun. His jazz background drew him to free-form music, where strict adherence to tempo was less important. Over time, he focused more on using the organ, electric piano, or synthesizer to complement each piece, though he still included occasional solos. Following Barrett's replacement by David Gilmour, Wright took on some songwriting but gradually became less involved. However, his keyboard playing remained essential to the band's live performances, especially on tracks like Interstellar Overdrive, Set the Controls for the Heart of the Sun, and Careful with That Axe Eugene. He contributed to Pink Floyd's film scores for More, Zabriskie Point, and Obscured by Clouds, and made significant contributions to longer compositions such as Atom Heart Mother, Echoes, on which he sang lead vocals with Gilmour, and Shine on You Crazy Diamond. For the 1973 album The Dark Side of the Moon, he composed the music for The Great Gig in the Sky, and Us and Them, and contributed to Time and Breathe, singing lead on Time. In early 1978, Wright recorded his debut solo album, Wet Dream, at Super Bear Studios in France, featuring Pink Floyd's touring guitarist Snowy White and former King Crimson saxophonist Mel Collins. Several tracks on the album referenced his holiday home in Lindos. Released in September, the album achieved minimal commercial success. As Waters began to dominate the songwriting in the late 1970s, Wright's contributions to Pink Floyd diminished. Animals in 1977 was the first album without any songwriting credits for Wright. During the recording of The Wall in 1979, Waters grew frustrated with Wright's lack of contributions and his insistence on an equal share of production royalties. Wright prioritized his family due to his deteriorating marriage, which further strained his involvement. Reflecting on this period, Wright admitted to feeling depressed and unmotivated. Waters considered suing Wright but opted for an easier solution. Wright would leave the band after completing The Wall. Wright, backed by Gilmour, agreed to finish the album and the subsequent tour as a session musician. Various keyboard parts on The Wall were played by Waters, Gilmour, producer Bob Ezrin, composer Michael Kamen, and session player Fred Mandel. Wright often recorded his parts late at night when the other members were absent. Initially, he was not credited for his contributions, which was later rectified. Wright's departure from Pink Floyd was not publicly acknowledged until years later. As a salaried session musician during the Wall tour, most fans were unaware he was no longer a full member. Wright recalled putting his best effort into the performances and maintaining a civil relationship with Waters during the tour. Despite his anger towards Waters, Wright did not regret leaving the band, feeling it had lost its sense of communication and camaraderie. Remarkably, Wright was the only member of Pink Floyd to profit from the Wall tour, as the financial losses were borne by the band members. He did not attend the 1982 premiere of Pink Floyd, The Wall film. In 1983, the band released The Final Cut, the only Pink Floyd album without Wright, revealing to fans for the first time that he had left the band. In 1983 to 1984, Wright formed a musical duo, Z, with Dave Harris of the band Fashion. Introduced by saxophonist Raphael Ravenscroft, they signed a record deal with EMI Records. Their only album, Identity, was both a commercial and critical failure, leading Wright to later describe Z as an experiment best forgotten. After Waters left in 1985, Wright began contributing to Pink Floyd again, starting with a momentary lapse of reason in 1987. However, he remained a salaried musician due to a contractual agreement that prevented him from rejoining as a full member. On the album credits, Wright was listed with the session musicians, and his photo did not appear on the inner sleeve with Gilmour and Mason. By 1994, Wright had officially rejoined Pink Floyd. He stated in 2000, "I am a full member, but contractually I am not on a par with Dave and Nick." For The Division Bell in 1994, the second Pink Floyd album without Waters, Wright co-wrote 5 songs and sang lead on Wearing the Inside Out, which he co-wrote with Anthony Moore. Initially hesitant about his contributions, Wright later remarked that the process didn't feel like what they had agreed was fair. The Division Bell tour was Pink Floyd's last, and like Mason, Wright performed on every Pink Floyd tour. In 1996, inspired by his successful contributions to the Division Bell, Wright released his second solo album, Broken China. Co-written with Anthony Moore, who also assisted with production and engineering, the album explores the theme of depression, a subject close to Wright due to his experiences with his wife and friends. The album featured contributions from bassist Pino Palladino, drummer Manu Katch, guitarist Dominic Miller, and guitarist Tim Renwick. Although Gilmour recorded a guitar part for Breakthrough, it was ultimately not included in the final mix. Sinead O'Connor provided lead vocals on Reaching for the Rail and Breakthrough, while Wright handled the remaining vocals. Despite considering a tour for the album, Wright decided it was not financially feasible. In 2006, he co-wrote the B-side Hazel Eyes for Helen Boulding with Chris Difford. In 1999, Pink Floyd's touring keyboardist John Caron and Wright's wife facilitated a reunion between Wright and Waters after 18 years. They met backstage after a Waters performance. Wright later played at several of Gilmour's solo shows in 2002, performing keyboards and vocals, including his composition Breakthrough. On the 2nd of July 2005, Wright, Gilmour, and Mason reunited with Waters for a brief set at the Live 8 concert in London, marking the last time all 4 members performed together. Wright underwent cataract surgery in November of that year, preventing him from attending Pink Floyd's induction into the UK Music Hall of Fame. In 2006, Wright joined Gilmour's touring band, playing alongside former Pink Floyd sidemen John Caron, Dick Parry, and Guy Pratt. He contributed keyboards and background vocals to Gilmour's solo album On an Island, and participated in the accompanying live tours across Europe and North America. On stage, he played keyboards, reviving the Farfisa organ for Echoes, and sang lead on Arnold Lane, which was released as a live single. Wright turned down an offer to join Waters and Mason on Waters' Dark Side of the Moon live tour to focus on a solo project. That year, Wright attended a screening of the Pink Floyd Pulse live concert video with Gilmour and Mason. When asked about future performances, he expressed his openness to performing anywhere, planning to meander and play live whenever Gilmour needed him. On the 10th of May 2007, Wright performed at the Barrett tribute concert Madcap's Last Laugh at the Barbican in London. Organised by Joe Boyd to honour Barrett, who had passed away the previous July, the concert's first half featured a solo performance by Waters, while the second half ended with Wright, Gilmour, and Mason performing Arnold Layne. By mid-2007, Wright was living alone in Kensington and relished his time playing with Gilmour's solo band, calling it the most fun tour I've ever done in my life. Wright was deeply influenced by jazz legends like Miles Davis and John Coltrane. Unlike typical songwriters, he preferred to create thematic albums rather than individual songs. Many of his compositions emerged from improvisation and experimentation, which his bandmates often embraced. Wright described his approach as, "I just play and don't really think about what I'm doing, I just let it happen." Among Pink Floyd members, he was the most reserved, focusing intently on his music behind the keyboards. Besides keyboards, Wright played guitar, flute, cello, trombone, violin, drums, saxophone, and bass, and used instruments like tack piano, harpsichord, celesta, and harmonium in the studio, including on Barrett's Love Song and Chapter 24. Wright also favored Kurzweil digital synthesizers alongside the Hammond organ. Personally, Wright married his first wife, Juliette Gale, in 1964. She was a singer in the early band that eventually became Pink Floyd. They had 2 children and divorced in 1982. His second marriage, to Franca, lasted from 1984 to 1994. In 1995, Wright married Millie Hobbs, with whom he had a son Ben. His 1996 solo album, Broken China, was inspired by her struggle with depression. They would later separate in 2007. Wright's daughter Gala married bassist Guy Pratt, who toured and recorded with Pink Floyd after Waters left. Wright developed a love for the Greek islands during a sabbatical visit in 1964, before Pink Floyd was formed. After the Z Project in 1984, he moved to Greece, briefly retiring from music to enjoy sailing and yachting. He acquired a property in Lindos Roads, in the 1970s. In his later years, he lived in Le Rouvray, France, and spent time on his yacht in the Virgin Islands, citing that sailing provided therapeutic relief from the pressures of the music industry. Sadly, on the 15th of September 2008, Wright passed away from lung cancer at his London home, at the age of 65. At the time of his death, he was in the midst of creating a new solo album, which was believed to be a collection of instrumental compositions. His death marked the end of a significant chapter in rock history, being a key member of Pink Floyd, and contributing greatly to their unique sound and success. And there you have it. Although Richard Wright is no longer with us, his influence lives on through the timeless music he helped create. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about the legends of music. Take care and bye for now.